What's going on, everyone? It's Justin here, and today I've got a video showing you a week in life with the M1 Mac system. Whether it is a MacBook Pro or the Mac Mini, I use Apple's brand new computers with their own chips for an entire week, which includes general administrative work, the YouTube side of things, checking in on projects, but also some video editing as well, and my experience as to just how good Apple's new platform really is. So the holiday season is definitely a very busy time of year. The YouTube channel has more videos than ever before. You also have the gift guides, there's products to often research and figure out, campaigns on YouTube and Instagram. So I'm pretty much filming and editing every single day of the fourth quarter, but on top of that, this year we've also got an office renovation that is going on and near completion that I gotta check in on and kind of keep up with, as well as the opening of a clothing store that is one that I co-own, and the retail space kind of came up last minute at a good lease deal, so we made the decision after weighing the options to go ahead and open a pop-up. That store has to be set up within about 2 weeks to catch the holiday rush before going into a more extensive renovation in the new year. So without further ado, here's a look at a week in life using the M1 Mac, as well as my impressions of the performance, the battery, and the general experience. I started doing more of these like lifestyle film videos that blend in a lot of technology, so if you guys enjoyed this as you have in the previous episodes, make sure you subscribe to the channel, drop a like on this video, and follow me over on Instagram for behind the scenes. So I think one of the big questions is whether to get the MacBook Pro or the MacBook Air with the M1 chip. And in the past, I was a MacBook Pro user, but when Apple introduced a quad-core processor MacBook Air, I went ahead and picked that up, and overall performance has been quite good. But when the M1 MacBooks came out, the first thing that I noticed was that the battery life claims were crazy. Some of them even up to 20 hours, which was what this MacBook Pro is supposed to get. And honestly, the battery life is pretty good. I've had this for a couple days now and I haven't had to charge it yet, and this is one of these computers that I can say if you're not a very heavy user or you just use it like a couple hours a day, then it should be able to last you like 2, maybe even 3 days, and the standby battery life has been really good. So the main differences between the MacBook Air and the MacBook Pro is that the Air model does not have a fan at all. And instead of having 8 cores, it actually has 1 core that is disabled. So overall, like system performance and general day-to-day reliability on higher energy tasks is going to obviously be better on the MacBook Pro because of the addition of the fan. But when it comes to like the actual size, the MacBook Pro and the MacBook Air is not exactly like a night and day difference in terms of size and weight. The form factor is the same, it tapers off a little bit thinner on the Air, but it is a tough choice. I would say if you're thinking of getting a regular MacBook Air, definitely go ahead and upgrade to the one that has the M1 chip because it is going to outperform all the other models of that MacBook Air. But if you're looking at the MacBook Pro and kind of considering the MacBook Pro 16-inch versus the 13-inch, then it is a tougher decision because depending on what apps you use, whether it is like Premiere Pro or Adobe Suite, it may run better on a processor that is made by Intel versus the conversion layer that you have to go through with Rosetta 2 on the M1 MacBook. So now we're over on the desktop setup of the M1 Mac Mini, and I was actually very surprised as to just how many people were interested in this computer specifically. I've got a lot of questions and it looks like it is a real deal, and people really want to know as to whether they can replace their desktop setup with this one computer. And I've got to say, the M1 Mac Mini is definitely one of the pieces that I'm most impressed with so far. So for those who don't know, my video editing setup is currently the Mac Pro, and I invested over $20,000 in this system, and in some areas it's been really good. It exports very fast, and generally it's able to handle the workload, but it has just as many reliability issues as some of the worst computer experiences that I've had previously with like crashing, timeline lag, just random shutdowns and all that kind of stuff. And if you were in my office, you probably hear me complaining about how this computer just underperforms for its price every single day. So when the M1 Mac Mini came out, it realistically wasn't going to replace my main Mac Pro. But after using it, I think what I'm most excited for is the fact that next year we're going to have Pro computers with Apple's very own chip. So before we move on, I want to give a huge thanks to the sponsor of this video, Apple Maker, and their 2 new keyboards, the GK96S and the AK61. So these are mechanical keyboards that are made for the Mac, and as you can see, they make 2 different sizes, and they also have it in a whole range of colors that you can pick depending on your liking. But beginning with the bigger model, this is like a compact, full-size keyboard that is a 96% size, and it still has the number pad and everything, but it is also a mechanical keyboard, which is a really nice typing experience. And when it comes to which device you can use it on, it works with Android, iOS, Mac and also Windows, and it is fully hot swappable with customizable keys on the top. It can be used in wireless, wired, and dual connection modes, and it also has a USB Type-C port on the back. It also has RGB lights, which is very nice to see on a keyboard. So if you're looking for like a full-size keyboard that still has a number pad and has mechanical keys that feel amazing, then this is one option. The other keyboard that they also have is more compact, and that is the AK61, which is a 61% size compared to a full-size keyboard, but it still has all the keys and all of the command buttons for the Mac, which is awesome. It is their updated version to their SK61, and it is super compact, fully hot swappable, and has NKRO. What's great is that Apple Maker allows you to fully customize your keyboard depending on the color that you would like, but also depending on the type of switches you're looking for. They have optical switches that come in a Gatoron blue, red, brown, and black, as well as yellow, silver, and green, and also the mechanical line, which comes in a blue, red, brown, black, yellow, silver, white, and green. So depending on the type of feel that you're going for, they have options that are available. This one is definitely more audible, whereas the other is an optical key, so it is a bit quieter, and the key travel is all based on personal preference and what you plan to use it for. It is also nice that they have dual connectivity options, so if you want to connect it to multiple devices, or in some cases wired versus wireless, then you have the option to do so. So if you guys want to go ahead and check it out for yourself, I'm going to drop a link down below, and a huge thanks to them once again for sponsoring this video. So just opening up like Final Cut, for example, it is super fast, and Apple apps are already optimized to run M1, but I did go ahead and load some of the 4K and also 6K projects that we recorded in the past couple weeks, and one of the things that I've never had enabled on my Final Cut is better quality over better performance. I just want to have like smooth timeline playback and being able to edit a video, but in this case I decided to really try to push it to the limits. So we're going to open up Activity Monitor, and if you guys take a look at the screen over here, it will kind of give you an idea of just how much resources Final Cut is using at a given time. So we're just playing through this very quick 10-second clip here, but we're also going to go into like the general timeline and view the clips everywhere. And from what I noticed, I don't hear the computer, and the fan doesn't really go on in Final Cut until you really want to export. But I also took a look at the user CPU, and it is only using like 30% when I'm scrubbing the video and actually playing things back. Most importantly, something that I usually have a lot of issues with on the Mac Pro on a larger project is being able to change any red raw settings without it lagging. And here I'm able to do it real time, and I'm able to at least like play around with the settings and see how things work. And when I'm running like red raw, it is using about 40% of resources, but if I go ahead and check on the memory, a big question that I've had is whether or not 16 gigs of memory is enough for video and photo. A lot of people ask why I always want to talk about video, because not everyone's a video editor, and my kind of response to that is it doesn't make sense for me to go ahead and talk about a topic that I'm just not familiar with, which is development and coding and all that kind of stuff. And I feel like a lot of people are getting this computer to do creative tasks, so I really want to be able to demonstrate that. And as you can see, just from like general playback, if I keep an eye on the activity monitor, it is using like 10 to 11 gigs of system memory. It definitely needs a bit more if I was to use this on a day-to-day professional workflow, and I do imagine that the professional line of Macs that use the M1 chip are going to come with both a more powerful chip as well as significantly more memory than 16. But for like anybody editing in 1080p, or you're doing like photo editing and stuff, I've got to say, I think you're going to be totally fine. And the way the system utilizes the kind of performance and hardware that is being offered is quite impressive. So I've got like Lightroom open here, and everything loads up very quickly. If I was to shut down like Final Cut Pro 10 though, the kind of real test is how Lightroom operates, because it does go through the Rosetta 2 layer of translation as opposed to running natively. And Adobe has said that the update is going to come in early 2021. Once again, the computer is utilizing on average about 20 to 30% in Lightroom, and that is editing like one photo at a time. Just some experience on the desktop though, I think if you're coming from an iMac or an iMac Pro, say like a mid-spec option with even more RAM than the 16 gigs that is in here, you're gonna notice that it just runs super smooth, super fast, very well optimized, and overall a very efficient experience even on desktop. But If you've got like a souped up computer or you really rely on the Mac system or Adobe suite, then I'd probably say you should wait until like early next year, or at least like wait a little bit longer to see some more tests and real life workflows as to whether or not it makes any sense to switch right now. So one of the things that has taken up the most time and has also been the most exciting is the office studio renovation loft. So I've kind of done a series on this whole makeover process and renovation because I personally love doing that, but I also just want to kind of customize it and make it the perfect office space that still feels a lot like a living space. Even though I do have a project manager, this project has a lot of different things that I have to like check in on and make decisions of, keep track of budget and who's in and out of the office, film and keep up with that. So I always bring my computer to be able to just go into notes and communicate with my project manager and just ensure everything fits, is the right color, and has arrived. From a consumer standpoint, the battery life is incredible, the speed is great, it is really reliable and just fast overall, but I think from a professional standpoint, what I'm most excited for is the mini Mac Pro that they've been talking about for 2021, which is going to have apparently like a 32 core chip and up to over 100 cores in the GPU. Because the chip is based on the same architecture, you can actually run iPad and iOS apps from your computer. And I feel like this kind of leads towards a future where Apple will integrate touchscreens into their laptops. And I feel like the whole platform and like Big Sur and everything just seems to be pointing towards that. So now we're in like kind of like a rented micro loft to film a home tech episode, and as you guys probably see, I changed into my favorite hoodie of all time. But this MacBook is one that I've kind of brought around to review the notes and look at the creative brief and all the contracts, just to make sure everything is like in line, because there's a lot of videos that are being worked on at the same time. And as I mentioned, the first thing that I really noticed with this MacBook is that it is instant on. So if you flip it up, it is open right away. It doesn't take any time going from sleep to wake, and that is something that, even though it is very minor in some cases, I really noticed that immediately, because I know like on the Intel Macs it would take a couple seconds here and there and something needs to catch up or load. The other complaint that I did notice though, and I did have to do a bit of research on this, is how many ports this MacBook has. And I found out that there's only 2 port options available, so whether you get like the Pro or get it with like more RAM or whatever it is only available in 2 port options, which I think kind of sucks. With the amount of power in this computer as a laptop, I feel like some people are going to be using it for like production work, some video editing and photo editing, and although I have suggested that you wait until next year for the Pro models, I wish that it had 4 ports at least as an option on the Pro, because if you have like an SSD plugged in or like your internet on an adapter or like your mouse or whatever it is, 2 is a little bit limiting, because once you have power in, you've only got 1 available port and they're all on the left side. Battery life though has been really good, and this is like I think the 3rd day that I've used this computer on and off, and although I am starting to get really close to needing to recharge this, it is just impressive that it doesn't seem to lose much power on standby, which Apple stuff was already pretty well known for. But the battery life on these generations have especially been a noticeable strong point. And with advertised battery life of about double, that is to be expected, but I'm still surprised because I'm used to computers lasting a certain amount of time away from the charger. So the next thing that I've been working on is a retail space opening for the clothing company that I co-own. And for those who don't know, I purchased into a clothing company based in Victoria last year, and I've been wearing a lot of the stuff in the videos. And even though online is kind of the main push, as well as like retailers and everything, the kind of dream was to always open a retail store in Victoria. There was never a rush going into it, and I kind of like scouted out spaces, and this one space in the perfect downtown location just sort of came up, and we managed to get a hold of it before it was even listed for lease. Obviously a huge factor as to how and why it became available is because of COVID, and with that the lease price was really good. So we decided to go ahead and move forward with the lease, and the strategy is to just open up a pop-up shop for the holiday season and set up as much as we can within 2 weeks and go into a further renovation during low season in the new year. Similar to my condo actually, this place was a tattoo studio and there was just hundreds of holes on the wall. So my business partner kind of took over the whole renovation process of filling up the holes, sanding it, painting it, and getting some of the stuff removed and set up, whereas I did a bit more of the administrative stuff. And the general contractor was my buddy Bryce, who is also the project manager for my loft. Honestly, for 2 weeks of work, I'm really happy with the way that it came out. I think it does look pretty decent, and I was surprised as to just how much we were able to change the entire place in just 2 weeks. Obviously, being the tech guy in the business, it was my job to set up all of the kind of IT, the Shopify POS system, the lighting and fixtures, and just bring in some experience from previous renovations, but ultimately set up all the technology that is needed within it, as well as the marketing side on Google. So I was ready to bring along my M1 Mac, and the great battery life definitely contributes to having a laptop on the sidelines, ready to go at any time if it's not your everyday machine. Obviously, with the times right now, I'm pretty much sitting at home the entire day working on my desktop computer and doing all my video editing and administrative work from that, but a lot of times when I'm just like trying to get out the door, I find that my Mac is just like out of battery and ultimately leads to me not using it for a couple months. So just to wrap this video, I want to talk about like my overall experience with the M1 Mac after using it exclusively for an entire week. And I have to say, in some areas, I'm ready to take that plunge right away and go M1 exclusively, but in others, I'm just super excited for what they make in the Pro line coming up. So starting out with the laptops, I really like the M1 MacBook. It did fix some of the things that I still had in terms of complaints of the MacBook Pro and the MacBook Air, and that was the fact that battery life could have definitely been better. And after using the M1 Mac, I also noticed just how much faster it was to respond as soon as I open it up, and computers such as the Intel Evo line now have that instant wake feature as well, which is great. But performance-wise, I also noticed that it was just generally a little bit more like consistent. And even though my MacBook Air and MacBook Pros didn't really have any issues in the past because I always upgraded the processor and the RAM, I just noticed that the M1 was just slightly more consistent. So those are all great things, and when it comes to software, there were no like compatibility issues. Everything worked as expected that I would use. So Apple sent us the MacBook Pro. I decided to go ahead and pick up the M1 MacBook Air, and the only complaint I have for the MacBook Pro is that you only have 2 ports instead of 4 as an option. So the M1 MacBook Air made sense for me because I was already on the Air as my go-to portable computer before. But having the instant wake and the better battery life alone was a reason for me to go ahead and buy the M1 MacBook Air with 16 gigs of storage, and inside there's also a 512 gig SSD. And the price actually came out slightly less than what I paid for my i7 MacBook Air from 2020, which I'm now trying to sell. On the pro side of things, though, even though I had a really good experience with video editing on the Mac Mini and the timeline and everything was really fast, the export time was actually very competitive as well. I'm just not ready to switch over to that as my main computer because the Mac Pro, for example, has certain expandability options inside that are very useful. I have a ton of storage and like RAID setups and all that kind of stuff, and the Mac Mini just doesn't really seem made for that. It's a small unit that works very well, and if you're doing like simple video editing, then that will make a lot of sense. But if you have like a ton of storage and all that kind of stuff, then waiting for the desktop computers that are coming out next year, including the Pro line of iMacs and also the Mini Mac Pro with the M1 chip, will not only give you better performance because it is going to be made specifically for production and high-powered uses, but also give you the flexibility that you would expect out of the Pro workflow. So just to summarize that, I would say if you're looking to get a new MacBook like the MacBook Pro or the MacBook Air, I would almost say 100% go ahead and buy the M1 model. It has been great and I have no complaints. But if you're looking to get the Pro model, unless the M1 Mac Mini is very suitable for you and you're coming from a Mac Mini already and just want to get a performance improvement, you should probably wait at least until like the second quarter of the year when we do expect Apple to update that Pro line. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you all in the next one.